Caleb had always been known as the kind of successful man no one ever truly understood. He kept to himself, avoided the media, and rarely showed up at any fancy events. He built his career with his own hands, from a young engineer obsessed with numbers to the one leading a fast-growing fintech company. At work, Caleb demanded absolute precision, which sometimes made people think he was tough to deal with. But in everyday life, he was kind, respectful, and never saw himself as better than anyone else. Caleb's company grew faster than he ever expected. After years of hard work, they became the trusted partner of major organizations in handling financial transactions and analyzing risk data. It was a dream Caleb once thought would take a lifetime to build, but with persistence and a no-compromise work ethic, he pushed it further than he imagined. Even so, success came with a quiet, constant worry. The bigger a system becomes, the easier it is to attack or exploit, and Caleb understood that better than anyone. The past few weeks, he had spotted a few strange signals inside the trading system. Nothing obvious like a major bug, but subtle enough to make someone like him stay on alert. Tiny numbers, odd fluctuations, and a few transactions hidden in a very clever way. He could hand it off to the tech team or internal audit, but something in his gut told him this was something he needed to handle himself. Caleb always trusted his instincts, and this time they pushed him to check everything during the hours no one paid attention. Late at night, one weekend evening, when the whole building was already dark and everyone had gone home early, Caleb grabbed his keys and drove back to the office. The parking lot was almost empty. The dark glass windows reflected his silhouette as he walked in. During the day, the building was always full of footsteps and chatter, but now it was so quiet he could hear the elevator climbing through the empty space. He stepped into the lobby and felt as if the whole building was holding its breath. The silence carried a kind of invisible pressure that forced him to focus, to stay sharp. Caleb was used to being alone, but being alone in a place that was usually full of people felt different. He took a long breath and headed straight to his office. When the computer booted up, the blue glow from the screen lit his focused face. He opened the highest security level of the trading management system, the kind of access only a handful of people in the company could use. Numbers flushed down the screen, lines of code updated non-stop, everything looked normal, until he dug deeper into the advanced data layers. A transaction appeared with an unusual marker, followed by a chain of money transfers hidden under what looked like legitimate activity. When Caleb expanded the details, his whole body tightened. The number on the screen made him freeze. $80 million. That wasn't a small glitch. It was the kind of money that could destroy the company's reputation if anything went wrong. Caleb's heart pounded harder. He started tracing the source of the transaction, analyzing each step and identifying who had access to that part of the system. But before he could reach the most critical point, the screen suddenly froze. The mouse cursor wouldn't move. The lines of code stopped running. Everything locked up for a few seconds, then slipped into a full crash. Caleb narrowed his eyes, trying to stay calm. If the system froze while processing a transaction, the risk of losing data was huge. He tried restarting it, but the same issue happened again. A tight worry started building in his chest. Behind that $80 million were reputation, clients, and all the people who had followed him for years. If the system went down, all his work and his team's efforts would be in danger. He looked toward the large glass wall, where the streetlights cast a glow across the open office floor. Only a soft breeze moved, no other sound at all. Caleb stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and decided to head down to the tech room. He suspected a problem with the backup power, because there was no reason the system would freeze right when he was accessing its most sensitive layer. The hallway was dark and long, with motion lights flicking on with each step he took. Caleb walked faster, sensing that if he didn't act in time, the damage would go beyond anything he could recover. He had no idea what was waiting behind the tech room door, but he was sure of one thing. Tonight would be nothing like any night before. Caleb moved toward the corner of the hallway, where a faint light was coming from an area that should have been completely dark. He paused for a second, frowning a little. Who could possibly still be here at this hour? He had no idea that in just a few minutes, he would meet someone who would change his entire understanding of human value. A completely accidental encounter, yet exactly what he needed at this very moment. Caleb went down to the lower floor, with tension tightening his chest. each step echoing through the long, dark hallway. All the ceiling lights were supposed to be completely off, yet at the far end, there was a strange glow coming from the supply area where the cleaning staff usually kept their tools. He stopped for a few seconds and listened. A faint crackling sound, like electricity skimming across metal, slipped out from behind the slightly open door. It immediately put him on higher alert. This floor was always silent at night, and any sound out of place was something he could not ignore. He moved closer, slow and steady, eyes locked on the source of the light. As he reached the doorway, he saw a small figure crouched near the electrical panel. The girl was leaning to one side, both hands holding a live wire away from a patch of overheated metal. Caleb narrowed his eyes as he understood what he was looking at. If she let go, the wire could short out and throw a big spark. "Hold on. What are you doing?" Caleb asked, his voice low but clear. She startled a little, turning her head toward him. The dim light fell across her young face. It was a bright, gentle face that made Caleb stop for a beat. She wasn't tall, her frame slim but steady, carrying a sense of agility and strength. Her eyes were clear and alert, without any trace of fear, even though she was holding a hot wire in her hands. "I'm trying to keep it steady. It's about to short," she said, tilting her face slightly to look at him. "Can you give me a hand?" Caleb immediately crouched down to help. The two of them held the wire together, turning it away from the dangerous spot. Once they managed to secure it in a safer position, Caleb finally got a clearer look at her. Young, beautiful. But what stood out the most was how calm she was. No panic at all, nothing like how most people would react in a moment like this. "You work here as part of the cleaning staff?" Caleb asked, even though his mind was still trying to understand why she happened to be here at exactly the right time. She nodded. "My name is Maria. I work the late shift. When I got to this area, I smelled something burning. When I stood near the electrical box, I heard a little crackling sound, so I opened it. I'm not trained to fix electrical stuff, but I could tell something was wrong." Caleb examined the electrical panel more closely and immediately saw that she had done the right thing. The backup circuit was overloaded, and part of the wire had gotten so hot it had started to change color. If Maria hadn't caught it early, the backup power could have gone down completely, taking the entire upper floor system with it. And that system was exactly where Caleb had been analyzing the $80 million transaction. He looked at Maria for a little longer, a young cleaning worker on the night shift, spotting a problem through nothing but instinct and caution. "You did a great job," Caleb said honestly. Maria just gave a small shrug. "I just thought if it kept heating up, it could catch fire. This building is huge, and I didn't want anything bad to happen." Caleb felt the sincerity in her voice. He immediately remembered the moment the system upstairs froze. Everything suddenly made sense. If this electrical issue had gone on for even a few more minutes, the finance floor could have lost power, and the data he was working on might have been wiped out. His mood shifted from suspicion to respect. Someone with no technical background, relying only on awareness and responsibility, had just saved him and the company from a massive risk. He studied Maria a little more. Even in a dangerous situation, she stayed calm. No shaking, no panic, just focus on what needed to be done. Caleb let out a soft breath, feeling for the first time that night that he wasn't completely alone. "You really caught that burning smell at the perfect time. I honestly got lucky having you here." Maria smiled. "I'm just doing my job, but we should secure this wire for now so it doesn't cause more trouble." They used the tools in the cabinet to secure the wire in a safer position so it wouldn't touch the overheated metal again. Caleb kept his eyes on every move Maria made. She was careful, thoughtful, and focused in a way that made everything around her feel steadier. When they finished, Maria stepped back. "That should hold for now. But to be safe, you should check the tech room. I think this backup circuit has been overloaded for a while." Caleb nodded, then looked at her with a thoughtful pause. "Would you come with me? I want to check a bit more, and I might need someone to keep an eye out." Maria didn't hesitate. Sure. In that moment, the first layer of trust formed between them. No noise, no intention, just something that happened naturally because it felt right. Caleb led the way, and Maria followed, ready to help however she could, completely unaware that her small action had already changed this night and might even change his life in the long run. As they moved deeper into the tech room, the air was so still they could hear the steady hum of the cooling fans. Caleb switched on another auxiliary light and leaned down to check the circuits, but the question lingering in his mind still had no answer. A young woman, working the night shift alone in a building this big, why? When he looked up and saw Maria standing nearby, watching every move he made with real focus, he decided to ask. Maria, why do you work the night shift alone? At this hour, almost everyone has been gone for a long time. Maria looked down at her slightly worn rubber gloves, then lifted her head with a small, easy smile, not bothered at all by a personal question. I work 2 jobs. During the day, I help my mom run her little shop, and at night, I work here. The late shift is quieter, and it's easier for me to fit it around helping her. Caleb paused for a beat. He didn't hear any hint of complaint in her voice. Maria spoke as if it was just something she'd been doing for a long time. He sensed a quiet strength in the way she stood straight, in the way she didn't shy away from any question. Doesn't working 2 jobs every day wear you out? Caleb asked. Of course it does, Maria answered honestly. But my mom is a single mother. She's worked for years. I don't want her to carry everything alone anymore. And I need money to go back to school. I always wanted to study design, but tuition is a bit out of reach. Caleb stopped working. Design, huh? Maria nodded, her eyes brightening a little when she mentioned her old dream. I like creating things that are beautiful and meaningful. But I had to put it on hold. Not because I gave up, just, it's not the right time yet. This cleaning job helps support my family, and it gives me space to think about what I want to do later. Caleb looked at Maria for a long moment, not because she sounded sad or overwhelmed, but because she sounded so calm, as if putting her dream aside was simply what a responsible young person had to do. Yet in her voice there was still a soft optimism, a steady effort that never seemed to fade. Doesn't it make you sad to do this job instead of chasing your dream? Caleb asked. Maria gave a small smile. Being sad doesn't fix anything, and I don't consider this job beneath me. I do it with care because it helps my mom and helps me stay on my own 2 feet. I just want to do the best I can at whatever I'm doing, even if it's the smallest job. Caleb stayed quiet, not because he didn't know what to say, but because every word Maria said sounded like something he had forgotten a long time ago. He once had a youth full of dreams, once started his company believing everyone around him mattered. But over the years he got pulled into the pressure of success, into numbers, into responsibilities so big that he sometimes forgot the value of simple kindness. Maria looked at him and gently asked, "What about you? Why are you working this late? I'd guess someone like you doesn't really need to stay up all night checking things like this." Caleb let out a soft laugh. "I've worked alone for a lot of years. Hard habit to break. I want to make sure everything is all right. And sometimes, I just trust myself more than anyone else." Maria didn't argue. She only nodded slowly, like she understood that in the most natural way. I think everyone has their own reason for trying so hard, as long as we don't let it make us forget the good things around us. That line made Caleb actually pause and look at her longer. He could feel the honesty in every word she said. No show, no attempt to sound strong. She was simply living the way she believed was right. In that brief moment, in the cold tech room under the pale white lights, Caleb felt a quiet emotion rise inside him. It wasn't just gratitude for Maria catching the electrical issue. It wasn't only admiration for her determination. It was the realization that she was reminding him of something he had forgotten. The ordinary people whose kindness and sense of responsibility form the foundation of everything he stands on. "Maria," Caleb said, his voice lower than usual, "you didn't just save the system tonight. You helped me remember something important. I really appreciate you." Maria flushed slightly but kept her usual calm. "I'm just doing my part, but I'm glad to hear that." The connection between them didn't come from similar lives. It came from the way both of them were used to carrying their own weight, quietly and fully. And in that still night, Caleb realized Maria hadn't only pulled him back from losing $80 million. She had pulled him out of the numbness that had crept in over years of nonstop work. A small moment, but enough to shift something inside him. Caleb and Maria walked back to the main office in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind shared by 2 people who were carrying the same unspoken worry. Light from the building across the street streamed through the large glass wall and stretched into long lines across the floor. When Caleb approached his desk, the screen still showed the frozen error message from earlier. He took a deep breath, sat down, then glanced at Maria standing near the door. If you're tired, you can rest for a bit. This might take a while, Caleb said. Maria shook her head and stepped farther into the room. I'm fine here. If you need anything, just tell me. I'm not great with tech, but I can help keep an eye on things. The way she said it made something in Caleb ease slightly. She had nothing to do with his work, no responsibility toward the system, yet she was still willing to stay this late at night, just to help. He restarted the entire system, hands on the keyboard, eyes fixed on the loading bar crawling across the screen. Within seconds, a red alert popped up. The system reported a critical error. There was a warning about the risk of temporary data loss, maybe even permanent loss if it wasn't handled the right way. Caleb felt his chest tighten. This was exactly what he had feared. If the data disappeared right when he was tracing that strange transaction, the entire investigation would be wiped clean. Everything he had uncovered so far would vanish. Worse, whoever was behind the transaction could use the crash to cover their tracks. Maria glanced over. She didn't understand the technical details, but she could feel Caleb's tension clearly. She stepped closer, resting her hand near the edge of the desk, her voice steady. You should breathe first. One step at a time. You can't fix anything if you're too stressed. Caleb followed her without thinking. He inhaled deeply and let the air out slowly, not because she told him to, but because her gentle voice made it easy to listen. Maria stood slightly to the side, watching the screen. She didn't fully understand everything, but she could spot which sections were flashing in an unusual pattern. I'm not sure, Maria said, but it looks like this part, it keeps repeating something without finishing. Caleb glanced over, surprised she wasn't just guessing. Yeah, the system is trying to run a backup process, but it's getting blocked halfway. He started moving faster, trying to switch the data into temporary protection mode. It was a safeguard used only when the system was at high risk of crashing, but it would only work if the power source was completely stable. Caleb knew that, and suddenly the image of Maria holding the hot wire downstairs came back to him. He understood in that instant. Her catching the electrical problem early was the only reason the power hadn't gone out entirely. If she hadn't, all this data would probably already be gone. He focused completely and ran the data transfer command. On the screen, the progress bars started to move. When it hit 20%, the system flickered, then another warning popped up. Caleb clenched his jaw. Maria placed her hand on the back of his chair, her voice quiet but steady. It's okay. Keep going. It's still running. Caleb rarely let anyone affect his mindset while he worked, but this time, he felt steadier with Maria behind him. His movements grew sharper and more controlled. He slipped through a gap in the system and used his special access clearance to push the data into the secure storage vault. When the progress bar reached 60%, both of them held their breath. Maria, you saved the power system tonight, Caleb said, eyes still on the screen. Without you, I don't know if this data would still be here. Maria tilted her head slightly. I just reacted on instinct. I saw something was off, and I checked it. Nothing big, but to Caleb it was anything but small. He looked over at her, his eyes sincere, almost grateful. Maria stood calmly, unaware that what she had done might have saved the entire company, not just Caleb's workstation. When the progress bar hit 100%, the screen shifted to green. The system confirmed that the data had been moved into temporary protection mode, safe from being erased. Caleb leaned back in his chair and let out a long, relieved breath. Maria exhaled too, but her smile was soft, like she was simply glad she had done the right thing. For a moment, they stared at the screen together, as if they had dodged something disastrous at the very last second. $80 million in transactions, along with countless critical records, were still intact. Caleb felt the weight on his shoulders lift in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. He turned to Maria, his voice low and genuine. You didn't just help me, you saved the entire company. Maria shook her head lightly. I just did what anyone should do when they see something dangerous. Caleb knew not everyone would have done what she did. Her sense of kindness and responsibility came through in her actions, not in her words. In that moment, he understood something clearly. A person's value isn't defined by the job they do, but by the way they treat the world around them. And that night, as the system came back to life under the soft blue glow of the screen, Caleb felt his view of people shifting. He saw that kindness, when it shows up at the right moment, carries more power than any title or position. And the person who made him realize that was the young woman standing beside him, with hands small but stronger than he ever expected. With the system finally stable again, Caleb sat up straight and reopened the transaction tracing interface. The green progress bars that had just finished were still showing in the corner of the screen, reminding him that only minutes ago everything had nearly collapsed. But now, with the data protected, he could continue the work he came here to do. Maria stepped back a little, keeping her eyes on him without intruding. She simply observed quietly, like someone making sure he didn't have to face this alone. Caleb entered his high-level access code and opened the advanced data layer that only a few people in the company knew how to use. Lines of code flashed, then stopped at a transaction report hidden under a legitimate pattern. He zoomed in on one small entry. The $80 million showed up again. This time, with the system steady, he could see each step of the transaction clearly. Every layer he opened was like a light shining on a truth someone had tried to bury. Caleb stayed silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "This isn't a system error." Maria tilted her head. "You mean someone did this?" Caleb kept working. The data sharpened with every command he executed. Finally, an internal employee ID appeared on the screen. There was no doubt now. Someone inside the company had deliberately manipulated the data to move that massive amount of money out, hiding it behind a chain of fake transactions. If he hadn't caught it in time, just a few more hours and the money could have disappeared without a trace. He leaned back, his eyes heavy. The disappointment on his face wasn't about betrayal, but about knowing he had believed his team was the most trustworthy group he had ever built. Caleb had tried to create a fair, transparent environment, yet someone among them had still chosen to act against everything he valued. Maria stood beside him, silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "I think sometimes people do the wrong thing because they're under a pressure nobody else sees." Caleb turned his chair slightly to look at her. "You really think that?" Maria nodded, her eyes plain and honest. "I'm not excusing what they did, but I believe some people get pushed to a breaking point they can't get past. Not everyone is strong enough to always do the right thing." She spoke with understanding, not naivety. Caleb recognized that right away. Her words made him pause and take a slow breath. He still felt the sting of what he had discovered, but Maria's perspective pulled him back just enough so emotion wouldn't take the lead. "I have to deal with this," Caleb said, his voice no longer sharp with anger. "But I need to do it the right way. I want to be fair to everyone, no matter how serious this is." Maria nodded gently. "That's the right way to do it." Caleb opened more windows and began collecting evidence. Access logs, timestamps, transaction copies, traces of data tampering. One by one, he dragged each item into an encrypted folder and stored it in the most secure vault he trusted. Maria stood beside him, watching him work with complete focus. Sometimes she helped by saving backup copies, labeling them neatly so nothing would get mixed up. She wasn't skilled with technology, but she was good at noticing small details. While Caleb was opening a heavy data window, Maria spotted a log he hadn't saved yet and quietly pointed it out. Caleb looked a little surprised, then smiled to himself. Not everyone had that kind of observation, especially under pressure. He finished gathering the evidence. When everything was finally placed in the secure archive, Caleb leaned back, his eyes a little softer. Maria looked at him and saw the weight sitting on his shoulders, but she didn't press too far. She simply said, "I think you handled it right. Being kind doesn't mean letting things slide. Being kind means knowing what has to be done without letting yourself turn bitter." Those words made Caleb pause. He had never heard anyone phrase it that way. It made him see Maria not just as the person who helped him avoid a disaster, but as someone with a perspective far deeper than her age or her job suggested. "You're making me think a lot," Caleb said honestly. Maria simply smiled. "I just say what I believe." A soft quiet settled over the room, but it wasn't heavy. If anything, it felt strangely peaceful. As if, in the middle of numbers, transactions, risks, and responsibility, Caleb had found a temporary anchor, something that made him see the world in a different light. And in that exact moment, as Caleb looked at Maria under the gentle office glow, he realized she wasn't just here by chance tonight. Her presence, the way she handled the situation, the way she viewed things, all of it felt like it had arrived at the exact moment he needed it, shifting the way he understood life, people, and what truly deserves to be valued. Maria didn't know any of that, but Caleb knew it clearly. When everything had finally settled and the system was safely protected, Caleb stood up from his chair, feeling like he had just finished a long, silent run. He turned toward Maria, who was still standing near the desk, her eyes watching him, as if making sure he wasn't tense anymore. Caleb gave her a small smile and nodded. "Want to grab some water? We should take a few minutes to breathe." Maria agreed. The two of them stepped into the long hallway, where the warm yellow wall lights made the place feel less cold. They stopped near a water dispenser and Caleb grabbed 2 cups. The space was quiet except for the sound of running water and the soft hum of the air conditioning. But this silence wasn't tense anymore. It felt like the pause they both needed after a long night. "You doing all right?" Caleb asked, handing her the cup. "I'm fine," Maria said as she took it. "I'm used to night shifts. It's just, today feels a little different than usual." Caleb let out a soft laugh. "I think neither of us expected tonight to turn out like this." Maria laughed too, light but genuine. That moment made Caleb realize that even though they had just met, a quiet connection had already formed between them, not because of the situation, but because of the sincerity that came so naturally. They leaned against the wall, standing side by side without any awkwardness. Caleb asked gently, "Maria, earlier you said you wanted to study design. Do you really love that field that much?" Maria's face lit up in a way that felt completely natural. "I've loved it since I was a kid. I used to cut old clothes and turn them into what I wanted. My mom always encouraged me, but I knew we couldn't afford it. So I put that dream aside for a while, at least until I get the chance to try again." Caleb listened closely, not missing a single detail. He could hear the softness in her voice, but he also sensed the small trace of regret beneath it. Maria didn't blame anyone or complain. She spoke like someone who understood that life can be hard and chose to face it with kindness and steady effort. "Doesn't it make you sad?" Caleb asked. "Having to work so much? Having to set your dream aside?" Maria shook her head, her eyes drifting toward the end of the hallway. "Everyone has something they have to sacrifice. But sacrifice doesn't mean giving up. I believe one day I'll study again. For now, I just try to do the best with what's in front of me." Her words were like a small needle touching the parts of Caleb's memory that had been asleep. He remembered being young, dreaming of building a company not to become wealthy, but to create something meaningful. But over the years, those bright goals had been buried under pressure, responsibility, and fear of losing everything. He had forgotten the innocence he once had. Caleb took a slow breath. "Maria, I think you deserve more opportunities than this." Maria turned to him. "What do you mean?" Caleb thought for a few seconds, then spoke slowly and sincerely. "I want you to try working as a temporary assistant for me. The job would be lighter than the night shift, and you could learn new skills, get exposure to things that might actually help you with your dream later. The pay would be more stable too." Maria's eyes widened in clear surprise. "Are you serious?" I'm just a cleaning worker. I don't want to take something just because I helped you tonight." Caleb shook his head, his voice firm. "This isn't because you saved the company. Even though I know what you did tonight mattered a lot. I'm offering this because I see what you're capable of. You're careful, quick, and you notice things most people overlook. I just want to open a door. Whether you walk through it, that's entirely your choice." Maria looked genuinely conflicted. She lowered her gaze, turning the cup in her hands. "I don't want to leave my mom with too much work. I still need extra hours to help her. And I'm scared. If I accept something too easily, it won't feel fair to everyone else." Caleb gave her a small smile. "I understand. And I'm not asking you to quit anything. We can arrange the hours around your schedule. I'm not giving you special treatment. I'm offering this because I really believe you can do it." Maria looked at him for a long moment, as if she needed to be sure he meant every word. Finally, she nodded lightly. "If that's the case, then I'll accept, but I still want to keep working extra hours so I can help my mom." "All right," Caleb replied immediately, without hesitation. "I'll make sure this job doesn't interfere with your life." In the quiet hallway, Maria gave a small smile. It carried relief, gratitude, and a bit of hope. For Caleb, that smile meant more than any thank you could. Tonight, he hadn't only saved the company, he also realized that sometimes the best thing you can offer someone is an opportunity that matches the worth they quietly carry inside them. A few weeks after that tense night, Caleb's office no longer felt as cold and heavy as before. The atmosphere had shifted. It was lighter, warmer, Part of that came from Maria's presence. She officially started her new role as a temporary assistant, just as Caleb had offered. Even though there was a lot to learn, Maria tackled everything with steady effort and a real eagerness to grow. She didn't just take notes quickly, she also picked up on Caleb's intentions in ways that surprised him again and again. Caleb guided Maria step by step, from organizing schedules and managing documents to handling basic reports. He realized she learned incredibly fast. All she needed was to watch once, and she could do it on her own the next time. That adaptability made Caleb appreciate her more with each passing day. Not because she was better than everyone else, but because she put her whole heart into every task, even the smallest ones. She had the persistence of someone who knew exactly what she was fighting for. During that time, the $80 million transaction case was presented by Caleb to the board of directors and the legal authorities. The employee who manipulated the data was investigated and dealt with according to regulations. Caleb never mentioned Maria's role in what happened. He simply said that a staff member happened to notice an electrical issue, which allowed him to save the system in time. The fuller truth was something he kept to himself, not to hide anything, but to protect Maria from unnecessary attention. He only praised her within the internal team, just enough, never exaggerating, because he understood that what Maria needed most was a peaceful life. Not everyone's eyes on her. Maria continued her old job after hours, helping her mother at their small shop. But now she worked with a lighter heart. With more stable income, she worried less about bills and her mother's medication. And most importantly, she finally felt like she could reach for her dream of studying design again. Every night after work, she would quietly sketch out the ideas she once had to set aside. Each small line she drew reminded her that she was still moving forward, slowly but surely. As for Caleb, he found himself changing in ways he never expected. He no longer looked at his employees, colleagues, or the people around him through the eyes of someone in a position of authority. He started seeing them through their actions, through the way they treated life. He became calmer, less harsh on himself. And whenever he watched Maria work, he was reminded that kindness is never a small thing. That night became an unforgettable memory for Caleb. Not only because the company was saved from a major risk, but because in what felt like a dark moment, he met someone who helped him find the light he had lost inside himself. A light he had abandoned in the rush of work and invisible pressures. Maria didn't show up to change his life. She only did what she always did, the right thing, even when no one was watching, and even when no one asked. Maria stayed just as humble as ever. No showing off, no claiming she had done anything extraordinary. When coworkers found out she had moved into a new role, she simply smiled and said she was just trying to learn a little more. But Caleb knew better than anyone. Her way of living, her honesty, and her quiet effort were what he admired and learned from. A small action can change something far bigger. The night Maria stepped into the tech room, because she smelled something burning, might have been nothing more than the instinct of a responsible young woman. But that same night became a turning point for Caleb. It reminded him of the value of people and the power of kindness. The story ends here, but the message it leaves behind is something each viewer will carry on their own. Sometimes life changes because of one small action from the person we least expect. What do you think defines a person's true worth? Share your thoughts in the comments.